2026 marks the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution and our declaration that we were and are an independent nation. The 4th of July is always a time for barbecues and firecrackers, and this year promises even more celebration. But what came before the fireworks and the s'mores? We know the names of some of the patriots who contributed to our democracy, but do we understand and appreciate what our freedom cost? This is Life in Jest. Welcome to our episode, and I have here a friend of mine and an author that is also with Calkins Creek, which is the American history imprint for Astra books for young readers. And it's Beth Anderson. I'm delighted to have her because she has so many beautiful books, and in particular, some very poignant ones about the American Revolution. So, Beth, would you like to give us a little introduction about yourself?
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I love history now, but I didn't love history as a kid. And I think because as a child, it was all names and dates and places, and it didn't really have any meaning for me. But now, when I can read about the actual people and see that they're not that different than us, it's a whole different connection. And I find it fascinating about the decisions they had to make. And, the whole setting, too, is so much different than we realize.
Yeah.
And then the war is so simplified in history books that we don't really dig into the nitty-gritty, the human aspect. We don't think about 8 years of this. We don't understand about how they had to forage for food and, all kinds of things that make it all sound so simple. But that for independence was anything but simple.
No, we really almost didn't win so many times. It's just a miracle that we won. And there's a lot of reasons. A lot of people contributed for sure, but I think we both agree that George Washington is just amazing. This guy, he found his way out of any situation. He did not take no for an answer. He said, okay, if this doesn't work, I'll find another way. Never gave up. And it's amazing. Yeah. So I share your passion, exactly what you said about when I was a kid, I did not care at all because there was no connection to humanity. And just by accident, I was introduced to the fact that George Washington had a spy ring. He was a spy master. And I was like, excuse me?
That's cool.
That doesn't sound like the man that I heard about, the wooden man. And that was it. Isn't it funny how a random thing, what's the thing that brought you to discover the humanity in history?
Well, just reading some of the stories, I think that I first found it in Benjamin Franklin because he's so creative. He's so inventive. He's so funny.
Yes.
Yeah. And he's also kind of irreverent in many cases, and he's so prolific as far as his reading and his writing, and it's just like, holy cow.
Yes.
This guy's a rock star, right?
That's true. Absolutely. Brilliant man.
Yeah.
He said, I think he said, beer is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. That's a pretty good one.
He said all kinds of crazy things. And the thing
I don't know if that's crazy.
That,
I agree with him, except I like coffee even more.
The thing he said that really got me going on my first book was those who don't know how to this is a rough thing. I don't remember. Those who spell best are the ones who don't know how to spell.
That's
And that is just typical of his really, his way that he would flip things and find different kinds of meaning. But it's true. And it struck me as a former teacher of kids who really were using inventive spelling all the time.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, yeah, he's talking about kids.
Exactly.
But, he was talking about people like his sister who weren't educated. So,
there's different ways to put things.
That kind of hit me. And
I love that. Yeah. It's funny how we just fall in love with something that we've heard of these people all along. And then all of a sudden we see them differently. It's quite amazing. And I love that. It's such a thrill. I always knew I was a writer, but if you told me I was going to write about the revolution and Washington. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
No way. I just never would have believed it. So it's really funny how life brings you to a certain place. But now we make people fall in love with the revolution through our work.
Hopefully, because
I
it's
well,
so much more than a war, you know?
I know, and people are all like, "Rah, rah," yes, "rah, rah" is important, there's no question, but what about the all the work and all the passion behind the "rah, rah"? The "rah, rah" is like, okay, but we almost didn't have "rah, rah." We almost so many times lost, and these people
Yeah.
sacrificed everything. They just walked away from their families and their livelihood and everything to go fight for freedom. It's pretty amazing. I don't know if people would do that now, it's like, no,
Yeah,
I don't
that's
think
true.
so. So,
Yeah. One of the things that really struck me with the new book, The Patriots and the Pox, that's coming out in September,
mm,
is this conflict between personal liberty and liberty for all.
mm, yeah.
And the people that were the militiamen who were fighting, like in Boston, they came from all different towns, they had different commanders. They were not unified. And the
Yeah.
fact that they had to be unified, Washington had to teach them basically how to work together
Yeah.
as a precursor to any kind of government working together. It's just, we don't think about that. We just think but they were always working as a unit, but they
Yeah.
were very separate colonies
Yeah, they were
and separate
completely
towns.
ragtag.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's unbelievable. And they also didn't even have uniforms. Everything was a mess because they didn't have enough money.
Yeah.
It was just a big, big mess. Tell us more about that book. Tell us the full name of it.
It's
Go
called
ahead.
The Patriots and the Pox, George Washington's battle to save the Continental Army. And
Hmm.
it's about his fight against smallpox, which
Wow.
threatened to wipe out his troops. And,
Yeah.
he was having enough trouble with the military aspect of it. But
Right.
the most immediate threat came in the summer of 1775 outside Boston with smallpox.
Wow. Yeah. How did he handle it for those of us who don't know?
Well, that at the time, it was very interesting to dig into this because I had no idea. At the time, smallpox was feared so much that nobody really wanted to face the idea of inoculation. People
Okay.
knew about inoculation, and the British were using inoculation, but it was
Hmm.
also endemic in Britain and all over Europe because it was there since childhood, and so anybody who got it as a child was immune.
Uh,
But the colonies had all these very separate kind of towns and communities, and they didn't interact. And so if they just stayed away from each other, that was enough to take care of it.
hmm.
And so when it came down to the war, when all the paths were intersecting and there were patterns of travel and communication and everything that never were before, it was pulling together people from different regions with, in different diseases and just all
Mm.
kinds of things. So basically quarantine was the only way they dealt with it at first.
Wow.
And Washington was having trouble with that because they were not obedient and disciplined
Sure.
troops. You
Yeah.
know, they
Yeah.
thought, and this is where the liberty idea comes. They thought, fighting for liberty meant you can do whatever you want.
Right.
You can go home to harvest. You can
Right.
do
Right. And
come
this
and
is the
go as
very
you
beginning
please.
of everything too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so quarantine just wasn't working. And
Mm.
when he traveled from Boston to New York, he had 19,000 troops
Wow.
on foot passing through towns and villages and
Mm.
all of that. And how do you quarantine in that situation? It's
Right.
just impossible. And smallpox would mess up his battle plans.
Sure.
When you got people who are sick, dying, you trying to treat them, you don't have all the troops that you need for situations. And so New York was just a disaster. He lost battle after battle, and then he got chased through New Jersey
Yeah.
as he went to try to protect Philadelphia, which was the capital at the time. And, after another year of that, he came to the realization that he wasn't going to win against smallpox with quarantine. He would have to do something more desperate. And the only thing they had was the inoculation. But the problem was that inoculation made the person who's inoculated mildly sick, but full blown contagious.
Right. Right. And
So
they knew that at the time. They knew it?
yeah, they knew.
Okay.
And if you got inoculated and you didn't quarantine, you could wipe out the rest of the army.
Oh my gosh.
So
Where
he had
where
to have
was
a
he?
plan.
What year is this now when he's doing this, and where was he?
He's What kind of changed everything, I think, is Trenton. And Trenton is a really easy or really interesting spot to look at him and the decisions he's making. And he finally gets a victory there, but
Right.
he's
When
also
that's after he
faced,
crossed the Delaware famously.
yeah,
Yeah.
after he's also facing the end of the year
Mm,
when enlistments end. And so
right.
most of his troops were due to go home.
Wow.
And if he lost his troops, there was no way they
Yeah.
could win anymore. They would be done.
Right.
And so in January and February 1777, he was agonizing for weeks. And he kind of vacillated back and forth a few times. He said, well, okay, we're going to inoculate. And then he said, oh, no, 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 we can't do it. And then he went back to it because he just
Hmm.
said, there's no way to win against
Yeah.
this disease except this. And we have
Yeah.
to figure out a way to make it work, to inoculate, to quarantine, let them
Wow.
recover, and then, bring them into the troops and to the training,
Wow.
into the army. So it was a horrendous idea of really mass inoculation that had never been done.
And I mean, back then with inoculation, what did they use to inoculate? They didn't have the kind of stuff we have.
They used the pus from someone else's
Gosh.
boxes.
Wow. Wow. Oh my God. Well, that is,
It's
what is that?
nasty.
What is the thing that they say that's a live vaccine?
Yes, it is a live vaccine. And that is exactly why it was so dangerous, because it could spread. And he witnessed what happened with his troops in Canada. And I wasn't even aware of the battles in Canada
Mm,
before this research started. But in Quebec and Montreal, the smallpox hit big time.
wow.
And the men were terrified. And
I'm
so
sure.
many of them deserted.
Yeah. That's
So
been a huge
then, of
problem.
course, they've been exposed to it and they're carrying it with them
Oh,
across the countryside to their families,
wow.
running back home. Some of them tried self inoculation because they were scared to death of this disease. Well, then everybody around them was exposed
Oh
to
my
the full
gosh.
blown disease. So all the chaos and death and sickness
Oh my gosh.
didn't bode well. And so when you don't have disciplined troops, Washington saw the disaster.
Yeah. Well, he did have that problem throughout the war, really, with the discipline,
Yeah.
because well, I mean, also I think it was also the direness of the situation. It wasn't like they had time to have military training and all the things that they have now, where that you can sort of, there was just not, it was just like this, boom, we're doing this,
Yeah.
and whoever's here is here. It really did. It plagued him through the whole war. The idea of desertion, but. This is a fascinating thing because you hear about small, you hear little mentions. This is
Yeah.
so typical
It's
of the way
usually
we
one
talk about the
sentence
war. Yes,
in a book.
yeah,
Yes, there
and
were
it, but it,
smallpox.
but it's amazing that's kind of reminds me of how we talk about what was the thing we just had? What was the
COVID.
disease? That's it. See,
Yeah.
which now it's just like a COVID, but meanwhile it was it was complete devastation. It was
Yes.
so horrible, and now
Yeah.
it's like, oh, COVID. But I think I'm trying to forget it. But as we all probably would, but you can't. I mean, it's
Yeah.
very important to have but imagine what we have modern medicine, and they had the pus. I mean, that
Yeah.
is so brave of him to even. I don't even know. It's amazing that did not stop the whole army right then and there. It's just amazing, you know.
Yeah, I think it probably took more courage to do the mass inoculation than to go into a military battle. I
Yeah,
mean, you can't really see your enemy with smallpox. It's this
yeah,
invisible thing, and by the time you see what's happening, it's too late because
yeah.
everybody's been exposed.
Right.
And the first time he tried it, there were holes in the plan, and
Mm,
so when they went to Valley Forge the next winter, he found that he still had 3 to 4,000 troops that were not immune.
wow. Wait, how did he know if they were immune?
Well, of course, you could ask them, but a lot of them had scars.
Okay.
He
Okay.
had scars because he had it as a teenager.
Okay. Yeah.
Sometimes you see those pictures of Washington with the little tiny dots on his
Yeah.
cheeks.
So if you had it as a kid, you were automatically, that's it, you were definitely immune? Okay.
Yeah,
Like chicken pox, I guess, like that kind
yeah,
of thing. Yeah. Interesting. It's amazing what they knew even though then. That always fascinates me how how people learned to deal with all this stuff. Like it's quite fascinating.
Yeah, there's a really interesting thing in there where I didn't get to go into it in the book. It's mentioned in back matter, but the knowledge and the practice of inoculation came from an enslaved man in Boston.
Really?
Inoculation had been practiced for centuries in Asia and Africa, and
Oh,
that's where the Europeans learned it.
wow.
So,
Fascinating.
yeah,
Yeah, it's amazing to learn these things. This is an amazing book. I can't wait to read it. So, can people pre-order it now?
they can. It's up on Amazon and Barnes& and
Excellent.
Noble and bookshop.org and all
Nice.
the good places.
All right. Well, I think that is really something. Especially, it ties in so well with we still. I mean, the inoculations is a huge thing now, right? So it's like
Yeah, we
so
have all that
fascinating.
we have the
Yeah.
controversy, and I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking now about Ebola and
Yeah.
hantavirus,
Yeah.
and, we still remember the COVID stuff, and so,
Yeah.
this idea of personal liberty, what's best for everybody,
That is
it's
such a
it's
hot topic
it's
now
not
too.
going
Yeah, yeah.
away.
No, I think it's so fascinating to learn about how it was dealt with, in history, especially in our battle for freedom. I mean, we really have to look at that as when you're in court cases, they always talk about precedent, right? Well, I think
Yeah,
George Washington is the precedent for anything we do now because this is the man that established us as a country. And so we have to really honor think about what he did and we have to that's our precedent, he's and our president. He's just this amazing
yeah.
man, you
Well,
know
the great thing about that story is that, his history lets us see the big picture.
yes,
When we're in the middle of COVID, we can't see our way out
right,
and we
exactly.
can't see the impact of vaccination and such. But when you can look at how it affected this key event in our
Mm,
history
absolutely.
and the difficult decision and the logistics and everything else, you can really appreciate it on a larger scale because there it is in history. We've been through this.
Yes, and what is that quote? Those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it, something
Yeah.
to that effect, right? Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I don't understand people that don't take the time to look into history and respect history because we're learning about ourselves. People
Yeah.
don't change. Humans are humans. We can have different gadgets. We speak. We have our new slang or whatever. Whatever. But what's our hearts? No, it's the same. Our minds are the same. We worry about the same things. We still want love. We want freedom. We want all these things. So we just have to examine ourselves. We have. It's like besides being history, it's really psychology as well and
Yeah.
philosophy. It's everything.
It's much
You know?
easier to learn from someone else's mistakes than
I think
your own.
so, right? Because aren't we better at giving advice to someone else than to ourselves? Like,
Sure,
this is what
sure.
you do. So, yeah, absolutely.
That's easy.
So, it really. Well, that's fascinating. And I want to mention, since we're talking about the trouble with troops, I figure I'll mention my book, Revolutionary Friends, next, which is General George Washington and the Marquis de Lafayette. This book has been like my total bestseller. It's done really well. It's in classrooms and all over the place. And I wonder. I mean, I love all my books, but it makes you like, why this one? Like, I love it, but I love them
Yeah,
all. I'm like, But I think there's something so beautiful about George Washington, like adopting without legal papers, obviously, but a young Frenchman. Like this shows that you can care about people from no matter where they are, and you can Washington had a famous dislike of the French foreigners, but mostly the French that were coming because they were arrogant and they were trying to tell him what to do, and they didn't even take the time to speak English, to learn English. But
yeah,
Lafayette was only 19 and he came here, rich kid, really had nothing. I call him kid, but he was married with children. Things were different then. And but he had really nothing to gain by coming here, but only to lose. And he did it because he fell in love with our plight. He wanted to help us. I mean, this
yeah.
is amazing, right? It's an
Mhm.
amazing thing to be so pure at heart to do that. I don't. Wow, and he paid for his own boat to come here. The king told him he couldn't come. I have no idea why. The king just got a bug up his butt, and he said no. So he said, and if you go, I'll put you in prison when you come back. Something like that. But Lafayette was like, too bad, I'm going. And he snuck out of France. He paid for his own boat. He paid for his own men. They snuck out of France. And then he was seasick the entire time because he still managed to learn English.
Wow.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And his wife was pregnant. I mean, maybe not winning Father of the Year, Husband of the Year, but he did love, he just fell in love with us, and he was already dying to meet Washington. This was like the man himself. So he came, and they had the nerve when he got to. First of all, he didn't land in Philadelphia; he landed in South Carolina, which was pretty far from Philadelphia in those days. When now we could get there fairly fast, but then he got a carriage, and the carriage broke down. He's like marching. His men were like, "Can we go home now?" And he's like, "Where go?" He was just so excited. He was just pressing on. And when he
Wow.
got to Philadelphia, they actually were like, "No, we have enough foreigners. We don't need you." He's like, "Wait a minute," because he had been told Ben Franklin and Thomas Jefferson were in France recruiting people, and
Yeah.
they didn't. They told him he was going to be all welcome, and you know, and but when he got there, no. So he's like, "Come on, I'll do it for free. Come on, guys, I'll do it for free." And but so they decided, okay, we're gonna let him stay because they didn't know the king said no, don't, you can't go. They figured,
Mhm.
well, he's in with the king, so we better let him stay. But they refused to give him troops, which is what he wanted. He wanted to command troops,
Yeah.
and he was well trained. He had been in the army in France. He was more
Yeah.
trained than anybody here. And excuse me. And anyway, he met Washington, and he thinks it was spontaneous that Washington really cared about him because he invited him to stay in his quarters. But I mean, I suspect that Washington knew that he had to be a diplomat with Lafayette. However, he was very happy to meet him because he was being yelled at by the Continental Congress. They were like, protect us, because they knew they were about to be attacked by the British. So, of
Mhm.
course, if you're being yelled at by people and someone comes along and is all nice to you, you're going to gravitate toward that person.
Yeah.
But he did. I mean, but Lafayette was the kind of guy that everybody liked, and Washington did. There's no question. He bonded with him. He told him. He sat him down and had a conversation. Congress refused to give him troops, but he said, "I want you to think of me as your father." I mean, this is beautiful, right?
Mhm.
But the part that really makes me think of what you were talking about with the troops were so ragtag. They didn't have the same uniforms. They didn't have anything. Washington tried to he did organize a parade to sort of raise spirits, right? But they didn't even have like the same hats. They all wore like twig crowns. Like they just were like all, so they
Wow.
would all have something the same because they just didn't have anything. And the troops were so beat up. Lafayette and Washington went to inspect the troops, and they were all beat up and bandaged. And from the last thing, how are they going to defend us from the next thing?
Yeah.
And so it was just a mess. And there was the problem of them. They might bolt at any minute. They might desert. And this is exactly what happened when at Brandywine, which was outside of Philadelphia.
Yeah.
That is where this battle wound up taking place, where the British broke in, and immediately the men started deserting. And Washington got the news, and he was like, oh, very upset, obviously. And Lafayette's like, let me go, let me go. I can get them back. I can convince him to stay. And Washington really loved him at this point so much. He's like, he didn't want to make him. He felt he would get killed, and he really didn't want to send him. It was like sending his own son. But Lafayette was like, so please, please, and he said, okay. So he sent him out, and Lafayette just burst off. He jumped off his horse and ran into the battle, and he just ignited everybody's passion. He just made them stay. Now, some had already deserted, some were running
Yeah.
away already, but he convinced them to turn around and stay. It was like amazing, right? And so they lost that battle. I
Yeah.
write more about losing battles than winning battles for sure. But I mean, there's a lot to learn. They always say lose the battle, win the war, and that's ultimately what Washington did. But
Yeah.
there's kind of more to examine in when you've lost, actually, to see where it went wrong and how it affected the people. But
Yeah.
Lafayette stayed, and he was rallying the troops, even though they lost. They needed the troops so they could fight another battle. Like what you said before, they can't win without men. They can't fight
Yeah.
another battle without men. And he then he got a musket ball went through his leg, and he's like, I know it sounds horrible, and
Yeah.
he's still rallying them, and he didn't stop until he got everybody back, and then he just dropped on the ground, and they brought him back, and they put him in the headquarters, which you can still go to. I love this that we have these places preserved. You can still go in the actual headquarters and be in that building. There's just something so amazing about being in these places.
Yeah.
And and they put him on the kitchen table because there were no beds. And so Washington and the other men came in, and they looked ravenous, and he said, "Please don't eat me," because he was laid out on the kitchen table. But Washington never joked. He was just not that kind. And he told his he saw how gravely Lafayette was injured, and he told his doctor, "Treat him as my son, for I love him the same." And I just fe
Nice.
that scene is what made me wanna write this. I fell
Yeah.
in love with that, his public declaration of love, and, anyway, so that book, you made me think of it when you talked about I mean, I would have talked about it anyway eventually, but you made me think of it with the desertion stuff. It's such a crucial thing throughout the war. He was
Yeah.
always trying to deal with the fact that these men, I mean, you can't blame them for being scared. You can't blame them for worrying about themselves, but they also took an oath to defend, so it's hard. It's
Yeah.
a hard thing to, it's hard, but
And
this
and
is this is a
and
major thing.
yeah, without the formal government who's raising taxes and paying for all the good things they need, like their supplies and their weapons and their uniforms and all that, there's not a lot holding them together.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a part of that story I thought too is trust, that you have to
Yeah.
learn to trust each other
That's very hard to do though,
in order
you
to be
know?
unified. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, how do you really do that? Especially you are bringing people from all over, they don't know each other, and
Right.
then there's this whole thing like, are we doing the right thing? What if Britain wins? What are they gonna do to us?
Oh,
You
yeah.
know?
Big trouble.
Big trouble.
But what you
Yeah.
said, it also made me think of the power of inspiration.
Mm,
Because like that, and I had to cut this from the book because but I still love these pieces. There was that moment in when they were in New York when the Declaration of Independence came out and Washington had it read to his troops.
mm,
That's a really cool moment. And then, right before they go to Trenton, Thomas
mm.
Paine is there and he's reading his famous words.
Wow.
Yeah, and
Oh,
that
that's very
really
cool.
it rallied the troops and they went in
Wow.
there with everything they had.
I love that. Oh, you had to cut those out of the book?
Yeah.
Oh, isn't it horrible what we have to cut out?
It's
It's so
terrible.
sad, yeah. I know, but put it on your website, let people know, you have to
Yeah,
let people
it'll
know
be in a
because
blog post.
absolutely, it's important because I can see it's true that things have to go. I think that's the hardest part of writing these is what to leave out. It really is.
Yeah,
But,
yeah. There's so
we have
much
to do it.
when you research, you just find so many fascinating things.
Yeah, yeah. But also, there's a limit in the amount of pages and everything, and it has to all flow together. So it's unfortunate, but we have to kill our darlings, as they say.
Yes, we do.
But tell me about the Prudence Wright because that's an interesting. I learned about her too. I wrote a book called what was it called? It was for Scholastic, our founding mothers, something like that.
Uh-huh.
And she was one of the people in it. So I did learn the story, but it's fascinating because you don't. This is something I never learned about her in school at all, at all. So
Yeah,
why don't you
very
tell
few
us?
people have ever heard of her. And
Yeah.
this is the book, Revolutionary Prudence Wright, leading the Minutewomen in the fight for independence. But she was a she lived in Pepperell, Massachusetts, and she was kind of feisty from the start. I mean, her father would take her hunting with him, and she was an excellent student, and she would challenge the boys in school. So
Mm,
she was a feisty, independent spirit from the start. But then when the British started doing their Townsend Acts and all the
yeah.
they she pretty much led the boycotts. And I love her story. That was a hard one, and because there are 3 different slightly different versions from various grandmothers
Mm,
of these characters, and it's kind of interesting to see how it changes with
yeah.
depending on who's telling the story. And
Wow.
so we can't be totally positive about every little detail, but I felt like her story was so important that that didn't matter. So it's
Hmm.
technically historical fiction,
Yeah.
but I would say it's 90% nonfiction.
Mm,
But when the men ran off to Concord and Lexington as Minutemen, she realized that the town was on the road coming from Canada to Boston, and they would have to cross one of the bridges in the town. If British troops came from Canada to reinforce the ones in Boston, they would trap all the Americans,
wow.
all the colonists that were fighting. And she also had overheard one of her brothers talking with somebody she knew from school who was in the British military, and
Hmm.
she knew they were working against the Patriots.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and much like today, this is one of the things that just tied it to now is that she had to kind of choose between country or colony
Mm,
and family.
wow. Yes. It's a
because
horrible
she
thing.
had 2 brothers who were loyalists and
Mm.
1 brother who was a patriot, and she was definitely all in on the patriot cause, and so, that's we're feeling that division in society and in families today, and so
It's funny because
that's
we always hear about that in terms of the Civil War, but they don't really talk about that with the Revolutionary War, you know?
yeah, it was totally the same. I mean, it's
Mm.
families were divided between the 2 sides.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awful.
But she rallied the women to go out and guard the bridge, and I love it. They wore their
Yeah.
brothers, fathers, sons' clothes,
Yeah.
and they gathered up whatever kind of weapons they could find because the men had already gone off with the muskets, the working muskets.
Right. Right.
So maybe they found some others, so they've had pitchforks, they had,
Yeah.
all kinds of things,
Wow.
axes.
It's amazing. Wow, can you imagine?
Yeah, and then they hid in the shadows, and along came 2 horse riders, and one of them was one of her brothers.
Wow.
So, I don't wanna tell the end,
That is
but
amazing. Yeah, that's such a story. I I ca that could be that could like that works as like on so many levels. That could be like a thriller novel or like that is like that is history is so intense like that and
yeah.
you've set it up so well to think about with a family and it's like it's heartbreaking and
Yeah,
also terrifying. I can't imagine standing there with just a pitchfork,
yeah,
or an
and the
axe. I mean,
choices
how are
that
you gonna get how
people
close you have to
made.
be to use an axe? Forget it, you know?
Well, the goal was just to be able to handle the situation before they recognized that they were a bunch of women dressed
Right.
up with farm tools, you know?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Terrifying.
Yeah, but
Wow.
that was gutsy
It's like so
move.
gutsy.
Yeah,
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's an amazing story. I think, and it's just shocking how there are these stories that we don't know about at all. Like they just leave these stories out, and I don't.
yeah.
I think part of it might be women get kind of disregarded, in that kind of in that
Yeah,
history
and the
for sure.
records aren't kept on the women and their
Yeah.
actions, but,
Yeah.
this is documented largely through the town records.
Mm.
So that's kind of a cool resource to start looking
Yeah.
at,
Eh,
the town meeting notes.
oh, I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's true. That a lot of research is found in the small little towns where these people were from, and you
yeah,
kind of have to go and dig. Isn't it fascinating how like certain areas, like historical societies, they know their own stuff, but they don't ever delve into the other. It's like this is our stuff. It's like it's so
yeah.
you have to go from little one to little one and piece it all together for the whole big picture. You know?
Well, there's so much happening in the towns that we never even touch on, and, like, she's like everyday woman,
Yeah.
She's dealing with raising her children, they're molding bullets at home, she's, gotta take care of the farm while the husband's off with his Minuteman unit.
Yeah.
It's like, seeing how they boycotted and gave up and sacrificed and just did whatever had to be done.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know how many people do that today, but I do
Yeah.
see a lot. I mean, in our present world, there are people stepping up and doing things, finding peaceful ways
Mm.
to protest and, just,
Yeah, there are definitely people out there. We live in, as we know, a very divided time, but there's definitely a groundswell of people that try to do the right thing, whatever the
yeah.
right thing
And
may
when you
be.
see that example of, unity and
Yeah.
perseverance, all
Yeah.
those things that those people were dealing with so much that we can't even imagine.
No, we can't. It's like it's unbelievable what they had to deal with. It's wow. It just blows me away.
Yeah.
I don't know how I could. I don't know. I really to this day don't know what I would do if I were faced with. I'm not sure. I'm such a chicken. I don't know.
Yeah.
I would probably go and support it, but I mean, I'd like to think that, but I don't know.
Yeah,
You
we
don't
don't.
really know until you're faced with something.
That's right.
You know.
But then I also think when you're faced with something, you find courage you didn't know you had
Well,
too.
that is so true. That is so true. Yeah, yeah. But I think what again, our books are. I just think they're important that they inform young people about all these things that happened and to know you've gotta like to really appreciate something, you have to see it from the people that were there, and
Mhm.
it's so important for them to okay, I used to substitute teach in well, all grades, but I happened to be in a 5th grade class one time, right? And they were doing American Revolution, and I had the arc, or well, they call it galleys, I guess, the galleys for my book Revolutionary Rogues, and which is John Andre and Benedict Arnold.
Mhm.
So they had to read about the textbook literally had like a couple of lines about Benedict Arnold, and they were all about after he betrayed us. There was nothing you really there was nothing to learn anything really about him at all, other than that he was a traitor or whatever. But like, why? Yeah, like
Yeah.
all the interesting things about him, the fact that he was our greatest general and he betrayed us. I mean, what? So I just took out the galleys and I read them the book, and they were like, "What?" And I'm like, "Now you know a little bit more about Benedict Arnold."
Well, see, I think that's the interesting thing. You see this guy as the traitor, but how did he get there?
That's the part that's
You
interesting.
see George Washington
Yeah.
as the hero, but how did he get there?
How did it happen? And what, but
Yeah.
yeah, the psychology of it, because again, we're learning about people when we learn about this. There's betrayal galore now.
Yeah.
We have to learn about how it festers and why. And, it's just so, and it's fascinating to read, but it's important to read because we have to learn. History is teaching us something, and we won't know
Yeah.
what it is unless we actually learn about it, you know?
Yeah, and kids are finding their own paths in life, and if they
Yeah.
can see other people and how they got to where they ended up,
Yeah.
that's huge.
It's huge. And also, this the other side of Revolutionary Rogues. Here, I'll just hold the book up. Where he is. Oh, I see him. Ha! This is my thing. It's so interesting that the alleged bad guy in it is John Andre. He's British. He was the chief of spies for the British stationed in New York, and but he was the kind of guy that you just fell in love with, like kind of like Lafayette, right? Like just like
Mhm.
one of those guys that you can't help but love. And even had written a book about a guy named Benjamin Talmadge, who he was he was the one that organized the Culper spy ring for
Right.
Washington, and I wrote my first book is called By the Sword. It just recently went out of print, which it makes me sad, but
Mm.
it had a great run, and I want to put it out in some form again, but I wound up I actually have a new book called Freedom's Cost, which is about Benjamin Talmadge. Like, and it covers the By the Sword, not exactly, but it covers the Battle of Long Island through what happens with John Andre and Benedict
Okay.
Arnold. And so I wrote that just sort of because I missed having something about Benjamin Talmadge, because Benjamin Talmadge is this guy was a pure of heart guy that did everything just for the cause. So much so that we really didn't learn anything about him because he didn't look for attention.
Sure.
So, and he was there at the Battle of Long Island and almost got killed, and returned to save his horse. I mean, seriously? He returned to save his horse. That doesn't that and Benedict Arnold, when he was in Canada and they lost and he couldn't take his horse with him, he shot his horse. Okay? You can learn a lot about a person by how they treat animals. Save
Yeah.
your horse, shoot your horse. Now you know all you need to know about those two guys, right?
Yeah.
Benjamin Talmadge never liked Arnold. He just had this feeling about him. He didn't know why even, but
Yeah.
he just had this gut feeling. And so when he found a guy who was turned out to be John Andre was found with the papers, with the plans for West Point in his boot, right? And he
Yeah.
was caught by these guys that were really highway robbers. They were robbing him, and they realized he was a spy, and they turned him in for the money. They were not. They really didn't care. They would have sold out to the highest person. And Benjamin Talmadge pointed that out. He's like, these guys are not really heroes. They just happen to have found a better
Yeah.
way to make more money. They would have just taken all his stuff.
Yeah.
And which it's all about what makes you a hero and who is good and who is bad. I love learning about that.
Yeah.
And but Talmadge, they said, oh, they caught this guy. We caught the guy with the papers to West Point, and he had a pass that was John Anderson. His name was John Anderson, and he had a pass from Benedict Arnold to pass because he was passing through no man's land. Okay,
Yeah.
which is a very dangerous place to go through. It's a long story about how he wound up there, but basically Arnold kind of forced him to put on the disguise and go. Because he wanted money. He wanted to get paid by the British, and he didn't care if it was going to be dangerous for John Andre. So Andre was, and if you put on if you take off your uniform and you put on a disguise, then you're a spy instead of an officer. And spies are
Mm.
hanged. And he wouldn't have been put to death.
Yeah.
There was no danger of being put to death if he didn't take off his uniform. But Arnold wanted him to make it there, so he thought the better chance was him to put on the disguise. So yeah,
Mm.
Arnold didn't really care about anybody. But anyway, so Andre got caught. And so he had the pass, and and Talmadge knew that Arnold had mentioned, if I know you patrol the area. If you see John Anderson let him go by, right? He'd said that to Talmadge, right? So Talmadge, like, he has a pass from Benedict Arnold. And Benedict Arnold told me that name. Maybe Arnold's involved in this. They're like, oh, no, not our commander. No, no, no. So they were sending Andre back to Arnold. But so Talmadge was like, I don't think he has the commander. He convinced the commander to call back Andre. So they got Andre back. However, a letter telling Arnold what happened continued. They let that go. Because they felt like they were getting in trouble if they didn't keep the commander informed. Because that letter got there, he got away. He escaped. And I mean, it's just ridiculous, right? Because nobody could imagine that this man betrayed them, because he was like beloved. He was like the top guy,
Yeah.
And when Washington, and also what he was going to do, he was not only going to give the fort. This was our major fort, West Point.
Right.
Really, really would have probably made us lose the war. And it was like our crown jewel, I guess you would call it.
Yeah.
But he was also going to turn over Washington. He was telling them a day that Washington was going to be there, so they would have captured. This is a man who loved him,
Yeah.
and it was just total betrayal. And so when Washington found out, this is what made me fall in love with Lafayette, or at least want to know about Lafayette. Okay, because when you do your research, there's like random people that come in and out of the research, right? It's like, why? And I thought it was like weird that this French guy was just around and no one was really saying what was going on, like, how did he just like wind up here? But what happened was, when Washington found out that he had been betrayed by Arnold, he just sank onto the couch in despair. And Hamilton said, someone has to get Lafayette. Only Lafayette can comfort Washington. I'm like, why is this French guy the only guy that can comfort Washington? And it made me do the research for Revolutionary Friends.
Yeah.
But Andre, meanwhile, Benjamin Talmadge's brother had died during the Battle of Long Island. Okay. And his friend Nathan Hale had gone. He's our most famous failed spy, right? He'd gone.
Yeah.
It was a huge mistake to send a stranger into a place as a spy, because he sent him into New York, but it wasn't like now New York. It was like everybody noticed that this guy, plus he had flaming red hair. It's not the best look for a spy, right? And they didn't have Clairol to dye his hair at the time. So Washington learned you have to use people that are there. And that's how he wound up with the Culper spy ring, using people that were in to talk it, But so Nathan Hale was hanged. And he was Benjamin Talmadge's best friend from Yale. They went to Yale together.
Yeah.
So Talmadge was changed by this, and he was a very pure of a heart guy, but he was seeking revenge the whole time. He was seeking to avenge his friend's death. So he taunted when he got Andre. He was given charge of Andre, and he was guarding him. And not guarding him, but he was there, questioning him. And he said, "You're a spy." And Andre's like, "No, no, 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 I'm the commander." He goes, "No, you had a disguise on. You're a spy, and you're gonna die." Like, he taunted him, right? And he was so happy to finally get this. But then, as the days went on, he spent every day talking to Andre. And he said he never felt so attached to a human being as to Andre. They bonded so closely. It's so fascinating about the idea of someone's your so-called enemy really being this amazing person that would have been your best friend in a circumstance. And all the Americans felt that way. Hamilton wrote a pleading letter to Washington to spare Andre. He also became extremely attached to him. They all did. And it was unfortunately, we talk a lot about Washington's good moments. This was a bad moment, okay? Yeah. Because he was offered the chance to have every American prisoner of war returned by the British in exchange just for giving back Andre. Now, that would have been a huge thing to have, right? But all he saw was his anger because he was betrayed by Arnold. He was so upset that Arnold had betrayed him because he just treasured Arnold,
But it's also a warning to the others.
Yes. I usually defend Washington for everything except slavery, but I can't forgive him for this because I think it was the wrong thing to do. Andre was technically a spy, but he really was a good guy, let him go back, he got caught up in the whole thing. He shouldn't have been doing this at all. There's a lot to him. And the book tells both sides, it follows Andre and Arnold back and forth. And so he was sentenced to die, and Washington could have stopped it, but he didn't. And when he's walking with Talmadge is losing his mind over it. He's so upset. And he's thinking about the horror of getting what you wish for, right? Be careful what you wish. It's so ironic that you're searching for this revenge. When you get it, it's another tragedy. when Andre was hanged, everybody in the audience was crying. And Talmadge said it felt as though his heart couldn't support it. Talmadge wrote, by the way, a beautiful memoir. If anyone wants to read an amazing memoir from the war, it's the memoir of Colonel Benjamin Talmadge. I highly recommend it. That's where I've gotten a lot of information from. Anyways, I don't know what to say except we don't know people just by what we call them. We call them a traitor. We call them a hero. What are these people? And the other interesting thing about Benedict Arnold is he's so famous because he betrayed us. Would we even be talking about him if he hadn't? We talk about General Knox because of Fort Knox, right? But do we really talk about the great generals? No, we talk about the traitors, except Washington, of course. It's crazy, right? So that's
unsavory characters. That's it.
Yes. I think it's funny what history tells the most about. They tell so much about these bad guys. Arnold was like the real life Darth Vader, Yet we don't hear about these unsung heroes so much. People that weren't even enlisted, like Prudence Wright, that did this amazing thing. These people are just not talked about. But yes, I love that story because there's so much humanity to unpack in it. There's so much. Yeah. Tell us about Cloaked in Courage.
It's the story of Deborah Sampson. And she's not well known, but more people have heard of Deborah Sampson.
Yes.
There have been some books about her, but they're all really highly fictionalized because she is kind of a real mystery from history.
Yes, I love that.
Because her time as a soldier is based on a lie. She passed herself off as a man, and so the records tend to be false. And then there was this guy who was sort of using her to make money. Horace Mann, he wrote her bio and he put her out on tour and he wrote her speeches. And so you really can't tell what's from her and what's from him.
It's really interesting, actually.
Yeah. So
I didn't realize that somebody else was doing that. I knew that she toured, but I didn't really know that.
And the book doesn't get into that. It's basically about how she decided to enroll or enlist in the army and serve.
Yeah.
And it doesn't go past her, past the end of that service. But there is interesting pieces in her later life too. She was this person who lied to get the bounty and join the army. And so when I first learned about her, I'm thinking, I don't know, she sounds like a grifter.
That's so funny.
I have to really, really buy in and like a person if I'm going to spend this much time on their story.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So, but when I dug in, what actually pushed me to dig in more was there was a newspaper article that said somebody had found an old diary in their attic. They were a neighbor of Deborah Sampson, and it referred to her first attempt to join the army.
Yeah.
And I thought, first attempt? Yeah. I didn't know she'd tried and failed. I just knew that she had joined the army. So when you get into that, then you find out, she made a mistake. She didn't do a good job, but she was willing to take the risk again.
Yeah.
So there's something there.
Yeah.
So when I really looked at her early life, that's when I thought, wow, this is truly an amazing person. She was put out from her family at age 5. Her father had gone off to sea. It turns out he actually had another family in Maine.
Gosh.
But I don't mention that. We don't know too much about that. So anyway, he deserted his family and the wife, her mom had like 7 kids and she couldn't support them because in those days, women didn't learn the skills to support themselves.
Yeah.
And so she kept like the 2-year-old and the baby and put the rest of her kids out as basically indentured servants.
Yeah.
And so she started with an elderly aunt and was her servant for a couple of years. And then she served a widow of a preacher. And then she ended up with a family full of boys. But, the aunt and that widow of the preacher actually took the time to teach her how to read and write. And that was key to her future. And then when she was living with the Thomas family and there was just these whole bunch of wild boys, she sort of experienced more of the men's work, the boys' work, and she would stay up at night and use their school books, and she educated herself.
Wow.
And so if you look at what she was probably reading, there weren't that many books at the time. So you figure everybody was reading Robinson Crusoe There's a
Yeah.
story of adventure.
Yeah.
And they were reading about Hannah Snell, the woman who dressed as a man and served on a
Mm.
British ship.
Oh, so that's
I think
probably where she got
she was a
inspired.
pirate. And
Yeah.
then there was the story of Joan of Arc, who
Mm.
also posed as a male to lead
Yeah, yeah.
that rebellion or whatever it was. So she turns out there's this time where these people had been reading books about warrior women for years, decades. And
Hmm.
there were also ballads and there were poems. And so this was part of the culture.
Right.
It wasn't some really obscure idea that she came up with.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she could have been jailed and fined for acting as a man, for wearing the
Yeah.
man's clothes.
Yeah.
So she was taking a huge risk,
Yeah.
and she decided she wanted her independence when, she turned 18 and she got her freedom. Instead of marrying, she chose to go off on her own.
Mm.
And she
Wow.
worked for a while for some different families. She wove cloths. There's some stories that say she wove the clothes that she used to
Hmm.
dress as the man, but we
Well,
don't know for sure. There's also a story that says she took the clothes from some family she was working for. But
yeah.
anyway, she signs up as somebody and then she gets caught.
Mm.
They come back and they take the money back and she's humiliated. The church elders are coming to scold her
Yeah.
and then, in a small town at that time, when that happens to you, you're done. You've got no future.
Right.
And so she ended up trying again and being successful. So
Huh.
she got wiser about how to do it. She sort of practiced her role first for a while, roaming town to town. And
Mm.
finally she found a place where she could enlist and she did. And she went off and served in one of the Massachusetts regiments.
Yeah.
And
That's pretty
so,
amazing.
what really fascinated me about the story is all those skills and actual physical strength and all of those things from her childhood were the building blocks that allowed her to pass herself off as a man because
Yeah.
she'd done men's work.
Yeah.
She was tall. So she had all those experiences that fed into this choice that she made.
That's interesting. It's almost like her destiny because she had all
Yeah.
that experience.
It's like,
Yeah.
you pull from your experiences and they build you into the person you become.
That reminds me of weirdly, it reminds me of Slumdog Millionaire because remember did you see that? The kid,
Yeah.
he's winning that and they're like, "How did you know?" And he had all these experiences that led up to these
Yeah.
answers, It's kind of interesting how fate brings you to places.
And, when you look back at your own life, you can see the various building blocks that kind of took you to where
Yeah,
you are.
that's right. And some of
Yeah.
them were pretty unpleasant.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because she served in the end of the war,
Mm.
when the major battles were over, but there were skirmishes and all the time in New York along the Hudson, and she was posted up by West Point. So she got in real battles,
And she was
and
wounded, I mean, right? I mean,
yeah, she
that's
got.
yeah, yeah.
There's discrepancy on her in her story about where exactly the musket balls hit
Interesting.
her, but there's all the evidence points to one in the thigh, and she tried to dig it out with a
Yeah.
knife,
Can you
and she
imagine?
couldn't get it out, and she ended up with a limp the rest of her life.
Yeah.
And there's also evidence that she got hit in the shoulder.
Yeah. That's crazy. I can't even
Yeah.
imagine.
She pulled off the role. Nobody knew.
Yeah.
And one of the things I loved was that she hid behind excellence.
Mm.
When you do your job so well, no one
Yeah.
questions you,
That's the
right?
truth. That's the truth.
Isn't that's
I
an
love that.
interesting way to think of it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she volunteered for things all the time because she didn't want to get stuck, with the men sitting around playing cards or drinking
That's funny.
because
Yeah.
they would have a chance to know her more
Yeah.
closely.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, she volunteered for everything to
Wow.
build the cabins and then
Wow.
so she was recognized for that and she
Wow.
got assigned to the commander's household.
Oh my gosh.
Like, whoa, I'm not sure I want to go there.
Right. That's so crazy.
It's kind of be careful what you wish for again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
she was serving the officers dinner
Wow.
and stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, and
Be
it
so careful.
never occurred to them.
Yeah, but in a way, isn't it true that those people are sort of always invisible, the people that are
Yeah,
serving and this
yeah.
and that, it's interesting. Yeah.
It's a
Wow.
fascinating story.
Yeah. So what do you think about her, though? Do you find that you like her, having written this?
Oh,
Do you
yes.
admire? Yeah.
Once I started to learn about why she did what she did, total respect,
Yeah.
and admiration for someone with such courage and
Yeah.
determination,
Yeah.
because that can't have been easy.
No.
17
Yeah.
months trying
No.
to hide your identity.
Yeah, and you can't confide in anybody, I mean,
No,
you're all alone. You're
yeah,
among people, but you can't
but you're
but yet you're
alone.
alone.
And
Yeah.
then, people would say, well, how could she pull that off? What about going to the bathroom? What about sleeping in the cabins? What about, and the cabins were one thing, or the buildings at the camps, because they were like, I don't know, they housed 16 people in a small cabin.
Yeah.
And so that was her most dangerous moments, was that. But,
Yeah.
the shirts that they wore were long.
Yeah.
They often used the bathroom, went to the bathroom in the woods.
Yeah.
So that's what she would do. They never took showers. They
Right.
never changed their
No.
clothes.
It was a pretty smelly place, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, it's true. And it goes to show you, because the habits of people during a war, like, is totally different than what we're used to. So I often stop and try to think about, how do people in any of these books, like, how did they do this? And it's like, blows your mind, but it's just like moment by moment. They just went with it, and it is amazing that she was able to pull that
yeah.
off. But
But
on the other hand, having had such a hard childhood, this was probably nothing compared to that, honestly. It sounds horrible to be 5 and being put out and having all this happen to you. I mean, she's a different person than we could ever be.
yeah,
It was horrible, but it also made her much stronger too. She was alone all that time too, so
basically, yeah.
yeah. That broke my heart when hearing that part of her.
Books
Yeah.
really saved her,
Yeah.
and the way she
Sure.
educated herself. When I read that story to kids and mention that she was put out to be a servant at 5 years old, there's like an audible gasp
Yeah. I
from the
know. Can you
kids.
imagine? I mean, of course.
You just
Yeah.
can't imagine that now.
No. Oh, I'm telling you, it's a crazy thing. But I don't know. That's why I think it's so important to read these stories. I'm not just saying because we wrote them. I mean, I just admire history so much now. And I feel like, when people like converted, like they're born again, that's how I feel about history. It's like, oh, you
Yeah.
must read this. You must. I want to proselytize, come on, I'm going to go door to door with the books, instead of like going with the pamphlets. Like, no, read these books. Oh my God. My son once went out. He was little. He's like, I will sell your books for you. I'm like, all right, whatever. He went door to door. He sold books. I'm like, oh my God, maybe I have something here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because who's going to turn down the little kid? You know what I mean? It's kind of funny.
And Deborah Sampson, when she got an honorable discharge, they did not prosecute her, or,
Yeah. Yeah,
she was not in trouble, because she earned the respect of all the men she served with,
Yeah.
and all of the officers.
That is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
That because
time.
it could have gone really horribly for her.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, she's a really interesting person. I didn't know I knew she had done the tour stuff afterwards, but I didn't know somebody put her up to it. I didn't really understand that part.
Yeah, he was writing her bio, and he made up stuff and put in there.
I knew that, but I didn't know somebody else did that. I thought she did that. Okay.
Well, it looks like he did it. He was trying to make her into the person that would sell books.
Oh, I believe you. I mean, honestly, my research, when I wrote this book, I had a deadline. It wasn't like I delved I did what I needed to do to write the book. But
well, it just becomes that you can't believe anything in that book,
right?
Because you don't know who said what. And
Right.
it's even got her serving at Yorktown. Well, she wasn't even enlisted at that point.
Yeah, right.
So they were trying to make her into a hero in
Yeah.
a different way. I mean, she was hero enough, don't you think?
I don't understand why they have to embellish that kind of stuff. It's true. I never have understood that. That reminds me of the show Turn, but they did a show about Washington
like that.
spies.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I'm a purist, okay? I can't handle it because they put things in that are not true.
Right.
They had the woman that did the woman that did supposedly she hung her petticoats, but that's not, you can't prove that at all. Okay. No one can prove that. And they had her having an affair with one of the spies. Now that, she's a married woman. Why would you do that? There's absolutely no evidence of that. How could you just besmirch somebody that is, this is a real person say I think she was somehow involved with the ring, but there's no evidence except there's a mention of her in a letter. I'll be at her house.
Well, It's
Yeah.
I understand it's for drama's sake, and you have to understand it's historical fiction.
Nah,
It
but isn't it
There's a
exciting
lot of
enough?
fact in it, though.
There is a lot of fact, but we have enough fact in there that I don't think we need. Why does sex always have to come into everything? I don't. But I don't get it. Oh, Hamilton. Don't even get me started about Hamilton. I mean, well, they'll- he the Battle of Yorktown. He made Lafayette like a laughing stock, like a little joke. He was like the little joke in the play. He's the joke that saved our country. He went back and got the King of France to join our war, and without the French, we couldn't have won. Okay. So
Mhm.
that's not a joke. Okay. That's not a joke. And also, he was the one that cornered them. Lafayette is the one that cornered the British at Yorktown. And then the French came and blocked the harbor so the ships couldn't come in to save them. It was totally because of Lafayette and getting the French to join and it was a cat and mouse thing in Yorktown. And Lafayette was being pursued by him. And then all of a sudden he turned the tables and he was pursuing him and he blocked him into Yorktown. But the guy's like, I could get out of here. My ships. And no, he couldn't get out. And
Yeah.
that is why we won the war, because of Lafayette. And then they make him a joke. And out in the harbor, Lafayette was not in the harbor. He was fighting even though his countrymen were there, the French were there, he was fighting as an American alongside Washington.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay. He loved us. He was our countryman too. He was honorary citizen. When he was here on his tour, he brought back U.S. soil to be buried with his grave. He loved us, okay? This is not a dancing monkey that I don't like. Have your play. Sing about Hamilton all you want. Do you have to make a joke out of somebody? Well, this guy that really is responsible for ending the war. I get so angry. I'm a purist.
Yeah.
I don't think I understand. I understand the idea of playing around with it for entertainment. But come on, you don't have to mess with somebody that was like a hero and make them into a joke. That's how I feel. So
Yeah, what I would say is that those kinds of things, especially the musical Hamilton, has gotten so many people of all
oh
ages
yeah,
interested in history.
there's no question. And my books, when they put the details of I don't know which books, possibly all of them. They say fans of Hamilton will love this, and I'm not against Hamilton. I'm very glad that people are brought to the revolution and getting really excited. That's fine. I just wish that he hadn't just used somebody as a joke. I just didn't like that. But
See,
as a
that's
whole,
because when we spend 2 years writing about somebody, they become like near and dear to our heart,
yeah,
and it hurts.
it does hurt. But I think Lafayette should be near and dear to America. I mean, he's our adopted son. We call him that, so I know. What am I going to do? It's wonderful that it exists and people fall in love with the revolution for it. I'm not going to dispute that, so,
Yeah.
but I adore Lafayette. You really do fall in love with the people you write about but they deserve it, because these are real people. These are not characters we made up. There's a huge difference. I mean,
Right.
we can love our characters we make up too, for sure, but I don't know. There's something about having an allegiance to this real person that we are now carrying the burden of their legacy, right? We are sharing their legacy. It's a
Well,
lot.
you spend so much time getting into them as a person that you become
Yeah.
attached.
And I just feel responsible for setting the record straight about them,
Mhm.
In Washington too, I defend him over like, oh, he did this wrong in the battle. Like, if he did something wrong, I mean, he did the best he could. This man had a lot on his mind. I mean, like, what are you going to do?
He wasn't
You know?
highly trained.
Well, he was more highly trained than the others because he was in the
Well,
French and
yeah,
Indian
I
War.
mean,
Yeah, yeah.
it was a choice
But
that wasn't
yeah,
the best.
no, but well, he wanted the job. He
He
used
was
to
the
go to
best option.
he went to the Continental Congress in full uniform. He wanted to be picked. He knew
Yeah.
it. But well, before we go, I just want to mention one other book, my George Washington spectacular. Speaking of Washington's fine moment, George Washington's Spectacular Spectacles: The Glasses That Saved America, which is a funny book about treason.
It's really
And
well done. Really well
thank you. Well, it took about 10 years to get it right because it's a very serious thing. It's about the Newburgh conspiracy, which so many people don't really know about. But I found it during my doing research about other things.
Yeah.
It was like I was researching Lafayette's relationship with him further on, and it just one thing led to the other. I don't even know. Lafayette wasn't there when this happened, but it's one thing led to the other. And I said to Carolyn, who's our editor, the fabulous Carolyn Yoder, I said, I just want to write a simple story about Washington putting on his glasses and saving democracy. And she's like, yeah, sounds good. but simplicity evaded me because there was so many factors to it, because it was conspiracies are pretty deep,
Simplicity always evades me.
That is the hardest thing to boil it down, right?
Right.
Again, what to take out, that's
Yes.
the hardest part. But George Washington had gotten glasses and he was embarrassed of them because at the time they meant you were frail. Like it was before the bifocals, which made it cooler because more people, I guess, got them. But he had them and they made him, he feared he would look weak and frail and he hid them. So nobody knew he had them. At the same time, now talking about troops deserting, okay, even then, it was the end of the war. The last battle had already been fought, and it was just the paperwork being done. The troops, they were all stuck there because the war was still on, right? So all the army, the enlisted men were all, sitting there, and they were filled with unrest, and there was so many mutinies, like always being planned, right? And so Washington would hear about them, and he had the leaders killed every time. That's basically what he did, like because you have to teach them a lesson, as we mentioned earlier, right?
Yeah.
And it sucks, but you have to show that if you're going to betray us, that it's not going to go well for you, So he was used to that, if you can be used to betrayal. But his own men, his officers, were plotting because they had not been paid in years. And they knew that once this treaty was signed, they wouldn't be needed anymore. And they were like, we're going to be broke. How are we going to take care of our families? And there was actually debtor's prison then. They could have gone to prison. This is the reward for defending their, freedom and fighting all these years. I mean, they left their family for 8 years, like it's insane. So they did the wrong thing, of course, in my opinion, because I'm just against treason. I mean, they decided to mutiny. It's a funny thing. They decided to storm the Capitol and storm a Continental Congress and take over. They were going to do a military coup, basically, if they didn't get paid. And there was really no way to pay them. They didn't have any money. Now, who was fanning their flame? Oh, a little guy called Hamilton. He was egging them on because he was trying to get more Federalist power. He didn't think they would actually do it. Okay, that's the thing, But they were like, this is on. So Washington was tipped off about it, and he was really devastated because he was not his own men. Those were his guys. Mm-hmm. That's like all your besties turning against you. Like he just couldn't conceive of it, right? Yeah. So he said, "Gentlemen, I know what you're up to. Give yourself another week to think about it, and I'll abide by your choice." And this was a complete lie. He was not going to abide by their choice, but he was bluffing to get them to wait because he needed time. So he wrote a letter to a guy in Congress, and he's like, "Dude, you gotta help me. You gotta write a letter saying they're going to get paid eventually, right?" So the guy wrote the letter, and so Washington was like, "All right." But then he realized, wow, this is like, how am I going to read this letter to them? I can't show them my glasses. So he wrote a speech to give them instead, and he wrote it like big, and he was like, this is really not going to be a problem. You know how you can talk yourself into something. It's like, I am really good at speeches. People always love me. This will work. So we barged in on their meeting, unexpected, and they're like, and they were like, he's like, "Oh, can I speak?" And of course they would not disrespect him like that, even though they're plotting against him. But so they let him speak. So he gave this long speech and grand speech, and they were completely unmoved. They were like, "No, this is on. And he was like, "Well, what do I do?" The only thing he could do was read the letter. So he had to take out his glasses. So he did it. He gave up all his humility and everything else, and was just. It's just this most awkward moment for Washington that you don't usually see, Yeah. So he puts on the glasses, and they're gasping, And I wrote their general was making a spectacle of himself, there's a lot of puns with spectacles, and I had such a great time with this. Once I allowed the humor, because I just don't normally equate the history with humor. Right. So it was but once I let loose, I'm like, oh, I could do this. So much fun. So he put on the glasses and he said, "Gentlemen, you must pardon me. For having grown gray in your service, I now find myself growing blind." And they just all burst into tears because they realized how much he had sacrificed along with them. And they were like, how could we have done this? They were so ashamed for being on this brink of treason. And they immediately pledged their loyalty to Washington. He saved democracy by putting on a pair of glasses. I mean, isn't that like amazing?
It is. It's cool.
I love that. Yeah. So I was so glad. It's always such a gift to have one of our books published, to have our manuscripts published. And it just, I think that, the thrill, I'm sure, never ends for you either, right? Like each one is like this whole new exciting thing, right?
Yeah, it's still pretty surreal.
It is. It's surreal no matter how many times you have books, but so I'm really proud of it. And it got the Colonial Dames of America Award, and it is Children's Book Council. It was a top 10 pick by kids favorites. It's number 4. And that was pretty good. And it was a teacher's favorite also. So really proud of that. And yeah, I'm kind of riding high on that. Whereas we get high from our books, it's a thrill, but, and your book, tell me again when the president, what is it called? Not the president.
Patriots in the Box.
Patriots in the Box. I knew he wasn't the president yet. It couldn't be that. When does that come out again?
It comes out September 29th.
September 29th. But we can pre-order it now, and everyone should just pre-order it now so you're going to get it. Otherwise, you don't want to forget. So pre-order it.
It'll be a surprise in your mailbox.
So I do love getting my pre-orders. Like, it's like, oh, what's this? It's like you forgot it's been a while. It's like, oh, yeah, I love it. What's the best mail? Book mail. It is. It's so exciting. It really is. I love it. I just want to thank you for being here. And this was so much fun talking to you because it's always fun when two passionate people share their passion, right? I'm just so glad that we get to do what we love and I think help people, because when you share passion, it's not bad. It's not a bad thing. It's a great thing to spread the joy, spread the love. We're showing that democracy is so important, but so fragile. We have to defend our democracy because we almost didn't have it, in this war so many times over. We didn't have it. I don't know how the Pox didn't wipe out everything. It's amazing.
Yeah, I get the book and you'll see.
You got to get the book. I mean, it's unbelievable, right? So I love what we do. And I do love this country, and I'm looking forward to celebrating our 250th. And yeah, that's it, I guess. Thanks for being with me.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Anything further you'd like to add?
Just start reading.
That's right. And
I'll put up your history.
Yes. Open up your heart to history. I'll put all our books in the show notes as well. But it's just as easy. Someone can go on your website and learn all about you. It's bethanderson.com?
Yes. Oh, bethandersonwriter.com.
Aha, bethandersonwriter.com.
Because there's others with the same name.
Yeah. And they can go on Amazon and get your books. These days, it's so easy to find people. I just love that. I really do. So there's so many things I love. All right, Beth. Well, thank you so much. And huzzah.
Huzzah.
Bye-bye.